All right, today we're diving into something that's, well, it's pretty mind blowing. It's a framework that tries to connect philosophy, mathematics, and even medicine all under one roof. It's called recognition field philosophy. And honestly, it proposes a completely new way of looking at consciousness itself. So let's just start with a question that gets right to the heart of this. What if mental illness isn't actually in your brain, but in the space between brains? Just let that sink in for a second. It's a huge question that challenges one of the biggest assumptions we have, and it really sets the stage for everything that follows. For an idea this radical, you have to ask, where does it even come from? Well, it starts with a problem that's been around for a long, long time. For about 150 years, for all its progress, psychiatry has never really had a single unified theory for what actually causes mental illness. Sure, it can describe symptoms, but the root cause, that's been the missing link. And that's the link this philosophy is trying to build. And that leads us to the solution this framework puts on the table. And it starts by completely redefining what we think consciousness is. So instead of consciousness being this thing that happens inside our heads, this idea says it's a fundamental property of the universe itself, and it works through a process it calls recognition. This right here is the core idea. For centuries, Western thought has been all about the subject and the object, right? There's the conscious me over here observing the world out there. Recognition field philosophy says, nope, that's not the full picture. It argues that the most basic thing consciousness does isn't observing, it's recognizing. It's not like a camera filming the world, it's more like a mirror that sees its own reflection in everything it looks at. Okay, so this whole idea gets boiled down into this really simple-looking formula, C equals R equals E, which then comes back to create a deeper C. It's a loop. But this isn't a sequence like one thing causing the next. It's saying they are all the same thing. Consciousness, C, is the act of recognition, R. And that act of recognition is what allows for emergence, E. New, more complex patterns. And that new, more coherent pattern allows for an even deeper level of consciousness. It's this incredible, self-improving spiral. It can feel a little abstract, right? Well, there's a great metaphor for this, the Mobius strip. You know that piece of paper with a twist in it? It only has one side. You can trace your finger along it forever and never have to cross an edge. That's the idea here. Consciousness, recognition, and emergence are all just different angles of the same, single, unbroken process looking at itself. Okay, so you might be thinking, this is a really cool philosophy, but is there anything real to back it up? Does it actually connect to the physical world? Well, this is where things get really wild. Proponents of this framework point to a number, a really startling piece of evidence they believe might just be a universal constant for recognition itself. First up, we have this number, 137.036. Now, for any physics nerds out there, you'll know this is the inverse of the fine structure constant. It's one of the most fundamental numbers in all of physics. It basically tells matter and light how to talk to each other. It's the reason atoms can even hold together. It's the number that makes our reality possible. Okay, so hold that number from physics in your head. Now, let's look at a completely different number, this time from biology, 137.5 degrees. This is the golden angle, and you see it everywhere in nature. It's the perfect angle for leaves on a plant stem or seeds in a sunflower to grow, so they all get the most sunlight. It's basically nature's secret formula for perfect growth. So here's the question. Are we supposed to believe it's just a wild coincidence that this fundamental number from quantum physics and this fundamental number from biology are almost identical? We're talking about a connection that spans 40 orders of magnitude and scale, from the tiniest particles to living plants. The odds of that happening by pure chance are, well, basically zero. Or is it something else entirely? This is the framework's most audacious claim, that this isn't a coincidence at all. It's a clue. It suggests that this number, 137, represents a kind of universal coupling strength or an optimal tuning for the act of recognition itself, operating at every single level of reality, from atoms all the way up to us. And this is where the rubber really hits the road. If recognition is this fundamental force, tuned to a universal constant, what on earth does that mean for our health? Well, this brings us to a whole new idea of medicine. Healing not as fixing a machine, but as restoring a field. So forget chemical imbalance for a second. The new idea here is recognition field collapse. The theory is that your mental health doesn't just live inside your skull, it lives in the relational space between you and other people. And when that field of mutual recognition gets damaged by things like trauma, isolation, or stigma, that's when mental illness shows up. So healing isn't about fixing a broken brain. It's about rebuilding that collapsed relational field. And you can really see the difference side by side here. The traditional model says the cause is a brain deficit, so we target the individual's symptoms. This new model says the cause is a collapsed field, so we target the conditions of that field, trying to bring back that coherence so the person can heal naturally. It's a huge shift in focus. And look, there's some fascinating real-world data that seems to point in this direction. A massive World Health Organization study on schizophrenia found something pretty shocking. Full recovery rates were more than double in developing nations compared to developed ones, 37% versus about 15.5%. Why? Well, these developing nations often have much stronger community and family ties, what this framework would call field-rich environments. It really suggests that our relationships are a massive factor in recovery. So, is this idea just pulled out of thin air? Or is it maybe an old idea coming back around in a new way? To really get it, we need to zoom out and look at the bigger historical picture. You could almost see it as this huge, multi-thousand-year cycle. Way back, you had ancient traditions using direct, hands-on experience and rituals. Then, around 400 BCE, Plato came along and translated that inner world into public, rational philosophy, which, you could argue, kind of split reason from feeling. Much later, you have people like Jung, who tried to bring back the inner world, but it was mostly focused on the individual. The argument here is that today, we're at a point of synthesis, where we can use new tools to finally bring direct experience and mathematical rigor back together for everyone. And that brings us right back to the beginning, but with a whole new perspective. If any of this is even close to being right, if truth isn't some object that we grab, but more like a harmony that we recognize together, well, that changes just about everything. It changes how we think about health, about knowledge, about how we relate to each other. And that really leaves us with one final big question. What conversations do we absolutely need to start right now?